Hello, friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Before we take you to your favorite Sports History Network show, just want to tell you a little bit about some merch that you can pick up that represents your favorite SHN podcast. So far, there's t-shirts, coffee mugs, and even books from some of the authors that do podcasts right here on SHN. Who could buy something better than that, than have the history right from the gentleman that you hear talking about it? But we also are adding things each and every day. And where's that store, may you ask? Well, it's at SportsHistoryNetwork.com. Up at the top, there is the SHN merch button. Click on that. It'll take you right to the store, and you can be representing your favorite podcast and show the world that, hey, on the swag that I'm using, it's the headquarters of sports yesteryear, Sports History Network, and my favorite podcaster, the Sports History Network store. Shop there today.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of Yesterday Sports on the Sports History Network. Today, we're going to have part 2 of the greatest offensive players in NFL history. Joining me are Arnie Chapman and Dave DePaulo.
Welcome to the Football History Dude podcast, where each episode is a journey back in time to learn about the rich history of the NFL. Your host is Arnie Chapman. Football is his passion, and he wants you to come along with him to explore the yesteryear of the gridiron. So hop on board his DeLorean, and let's get this baby up to 88 miles per hour.
Great Scott. Let's see, they got quarterbacks here.
Mark, you kind of tried to move on without giving us your running backs, if you could only pick the 4.
If I could only pick 4?
I think that's what you've been going with this.
I don't know if I could.
Or should we make a pick 3?
If I had to pick...
You got...
If I had to
You got to have... Who are they, Mark?
Oh, boy. If I had a 11-man, if I had to pick just an 11-man roster, I guess I'd have to go with the 2 that most everybody says. Jim Brown and Walter Payton would probably be the 2 guys. Hard to just pick 2, but I wouldn't have, they got way too many running backs here. I don't think I'd have Marcus Allen on my list, or Lenny Moore, or Red Grange, Jim Thorpe. It's kind of hard because, like Arnie was saying, by the time they joined the NFL, they were already past their prime.
Well, Red Grange is a little bit of a different story. So Red Grange, he came out and he was like
the college.
Yeah,
right?
he did come out right out of college, and he's what put the NFL on the map. I mean, he was that good at that time when it, like the superstar that comes out. If they had a what do you want to call it? What do I give the Heisman Trophy award? Like he would have been the poster child for that.
That statue at the Hall of Fame.
That one's Jim Thorpe.
That's Jim Thorpe. Okay.
In the rotunda, yeah, Jim Thorpe. Yep.
Right. Okay.
They talk about Red Grange. They said he was. Was it George Hallis that got him to come in or no?
Yeah.
Well, they were saying he worked at the Ice House. Red Grange, didn't he?
Yeah.
Play with the Bears?
He went to Illinois, and then he was one of the players why they had to change the whole you can't tamper with college rules, because he finished his last college game, and then a few days later he played on Thanksgiving Day, and for the Bears, and I think it was against the Cardinals too. It wasn't the greatest game that he had at the beginning, but yeah, they went on that barnstorming tour where in 2 months he played 27 games across the nation over to California, and they would just travel and just play games basically every other day or every day. He had multiple concussions. He was the first person in the NFL where they started really giving advertisements to. So he made a lot of money at that time for an athlete that normally didn't.
Right. I think it was him. They were interviewing him, and he said he met the president at that time was Calvin Coolidge. He said he met Calvin Coolidge, and Calvin Coolidge asked him, "So what do you do?" And Red Grange said, "I'm with the Chicago Bears." And Calvin Coolidge said, "Oh, that's nice. I always like animal acts." He thought he didn't even he didn't have any idea what the Chicago Bears was even.
Before we go on, I just want to say Lenny Moore, Mark, though, I did watch a video on him the other night.
Oh, I'm not
I
saying
think he
he's not
still to this
Hall
day
of
holds the record. He had 26 runs over 50 yards. I think that's still an NFL record. He was like these all-purpose backs. He was
That's
like
right.
the first one of those, like Roger Craig.
Yep.
You know what I mean? He was
versatile.
pretty good.
Oh yeah, extremely versatile.
And Marion Motley, he's on all the lists. I just want to say about Marion Motley.
That's right. Yep.
He's got the highest average, I think, of all time to this day, 5.7 yards per carry, Marion Motley.
Oh, yeah. He was a monster.
He was tremendous. He was big, yes. You're right, Mark. He was a very large guy.
Yeah, he'd carry half the team on his back.
Well, you have to have Barry Sanders on there. Absolutely. You have to have, obviously, Jim Brown. And you got to put Emmett. The more I watch on Emmitt Smith, not because he was a Cowboy, I think we took a lot of it for granted. Well, he had the offensive line and everything, but let me tell you, he had a lot of tremendous runs on his own. He did a lot of shit on his own, really. He was tremendous, Emmitt Smith. A lot of people, say, well, he had this line. The line was great for about 4 or 5 years.
I'm so tired
of
after that argument. That's the silliest argument I ever heard. You know how many running backs are in the Hall of Fame that had great offensive lines? Most of them.
Yes.
So it's just nonsense. And the comparison
and you got to have Gale Sayers on there, too.
Oh, yeah.
Gale Sayers was great.
Even though it was a short career. Looks like they also picked an extraordinary number of quarterbacks. The 1999 West. They have Joe Montana, Johnny Unitas, Otto Graham, Sammy Baugh, John Elway, Dan Marino, Roger Staubach, Sid Luckman, Bart Starr, Terry Bradshaw, Bobby Lane, Fran Tarkenton, Steve Young, Brett Favre, Dan Fouts, Troy Aikman, Joe Namath. So, that's a lot. That's a lot of quarterbacks.
Namath was the last on the list.
Yes.
Mark, of all the quarterbacks. I think he was number 100 for player, wasn't he? On that list?
Either 99 or 100. Yeah, he was near the bottom. I'll always defend Namath. But I wouldn't put him in my top 100. I always do defend him, though. But you got to remember, this is a 23-year-old list, too. So,
yes. That's right. I'm looking at the guys they knocked off that list. By the time that 2019 rolled around, the latest list, they knocked off, as far as quarterbacks, they took, Kurt Warner made the 2010 list. He was a new addition in 2010, but he got knocked off the 2019 list. And so was Fran Tarkenton. I don't know how you take him the hell out of there. I mean, the guy had like just about every quarterback record when he retired. He was tremendous. They took Sid Luckman out, who they claim you had to actually see him play to believe it. They took Steve Young out, and they took Troy Aikman out. So those 5 guys got axed removed from 2010 for 2019. And I don't know. I always had my 5 favorite quarterbacks of all time. I still say they're 5 of the greatest of all time. My top 5, and Tom Brady's not in that list, but I know he's great and everything else, but it's just such a different game. But my 5 for all time were interchangeable, a couple, maybe 5 or 6, but I had Elway, Unitas, Marino, Staubach, and Montana. And in no particular order.
Right.
I mean, those guys, every one of those guys were, this one of these books or one of these lists, I think it's 2010. They have Brett Favre ahead of Roger Staubach. These people out of their mind. Please. Brett Favre, the guy, first of all, he was a compiler, okay, in my opinion. And, they were an 11-point favor against Denver to win that game. Yeah. And they ended up losing.
Yeah.
I think Favre's the most overrated quarterback of all time, Brett Favre.
A lot of people do say that.
I just do.
He threw, I don't know, he seemed to get lucky a lot. He would throw the ball across the field he would do all the things you're not supposed to do, and he would get away with it most of the time.
But he lost a lot of big games by playing I won't take that away from him. Okay, he got lucky, but he some of the interceptions he threw were brutal. Even later in his career when he was playing for Minnesota and they ended up losing to the Saints.
Yeah.
That was brutal. You know what I mean? There was a couple. He was just, Madden's a guy that really contributed to his,
right.
And now he's got, he's had quite a few scandal. It started with the pills. Do you know what I mean? When he was with the pills, and that was like in the mid-'90s, and then he got crazy with the Jets with that woman, and then the recent one with the building of the field or whatever the heck they made. I mean, that's just, it's not on-field stuff, but it's just, wacky.
I eliminated O.J. Simpson from my team because if a double murder isn't enough, well, that's my opinion. I can't have him on my list. A double murder.
Look, the quarterbacks are. You got to have Montana in there. You can't get rid of.
Yep.
The guy was just tremendous. And you got to have Johnny Unitas in there. He's like the father, kind of that modern passing era. Like what's his name used to say? Who was the guy that used to go on David Letterman all the time? The lineman there, number
Art
70.
Donovan.
Art Donovan. He said in one sentence, "We had John." He used to say, "That's it." That's all he had. We had John. That's what he said. In other words, that was it. That was enough. That's all you needed to know.
Yeah.
You got to have Bart Starr in there because, he was, Bart Starr was kind of like Troy Aikman before Troy. They played on a running team, but he won championships. That's all they cared about was winning championships. He didn't have tremendous statistics, but he was there. He was the quarterback of those championship Packer teams.
Bart Starr is not on the 2019 list, and
he's not on there.
I do not agree with that. I think he should be on that list.
You got to have Dan Marino in there. I'm sorry, the guy was way ahead of his time. I know he didn't win any Super Bowls, but that 83 or 84 season that he had, I'll put that up against any. In its day, it was unheard of. Go look up that 83 or 84 season. All types of passing records.
Yep.
He was. Okay. Well, there's different facets to the quarterback position. So if you want to talk about throwers of the football, like I'd say there was maybe 3 or 4 guys that really like. One of them was Sonny Jurgensen. He was a tremendous thrower of the football, and so was Joe Namath. I hate to say it.
Yep.
And so was Dan Marino. Probably 3 of the best throwers of the football that I ever saw.
Yep.
And ever see clips of Sonny Jurgensen throwing the ball behind his back? It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
The ball's coming out like a machine.
Yep.
But he was just a great. And Joe Namath when those 3 guys when they threw the ball, they made it look effortless.
Yeah.
They were throwing the ball 60 yards downfield like it was, and it was right on the money.
Perfect spiral too. Yep. All right.
Yep. You could say Dan Fouts. They took him off, but he was another guy that kind of didn't win any Super Bowls, but he had a lot of pass. They had that passing team, Don Coryell, which started with Sid Gilman first, and then Coryell,
right.
And then Fouts was the beneficiary of all that modern day passing stuff. He had the Kellen Winslow at tight end. He had Charlie Joyner. He had John Jefferson. He had a lot of great receivers. They were like the first real pass-happy team were the San Diego Chargers of the 80s.
Dan Fouts, who was the first quarterback to throw for over 4,000 yards, right? Joe Namath.
Well,
I think it was maybe 1967. He threw for over 4,000 yards, and that held for like 13 years. No one came close to that until Dan Fouts. I think in 1980, Dan Fouts became the second quarterback to throw for over 4,000 yards. They were the only two up until 1980.
What year did they go to the 16 game season instead of the 14 game season?
78.
So what? So that was contributed with that 4,000 yards, maybe because of the extra 2 games.
For Fouts, yes, Fouts had, I believe so. Yep, Fouts had 16 games. Namath did it in 14 games.
Yeah, so that, I guess I'm trying to say it's even more impressive because it took him till that year, but he had 2 extra games to do it.
Yep.
Yes.
I mean, we're
Okay,
running
I'm
into
looking at that 84. Go ahead, Arnie.
I was just going to say, because we're running in, now that we've gone to 17 games as of last year, we're going to start running into that more again, that whole debate.
Yep.
Yes. I was looking at the 84 season of Marino because it was just tremendous. I remember this. I was, back then it was really outstanding. 5,084 yards, 64% completion rate. Okay. It was, it was, like I said, I'll put that up again, 48 touchdowns.
That
and
was
Marino, look, the guy didn't have any. They could say, well, he didn't have a running game. Their defense was not good. They talk about all these different things as to why he didn't win a Super Bowl. But even as I'm looking at his other seasons, 4,746 yards in 86, 4,488, 4,192, 44. I'm just going to go right down the list. He faded out a little at the end, but what are you going to do? But, I put him in there in the top 5 or 6. I always include him in there, even though he was not one of these typical guys that had a lot of Super Bowl appearances. No wins at all. Only 1 appearance, I think. And, you look at this list of quarterbacks, that's the problem. Like I said, there's so many different ways you can judge a quarterback. They got George Blanda on the list, for God's sakes.
Well, I think that's because more of his kicking. Probably more because of his kicking.
Bradshaw didn't have the greatest stats, but coming from a guy that watched him play, he killed you on 3rd down. Killed you. He killed the Cowboys in those 2 Super Bowls on 3rd down, Bradshaw. They could say, oh, he was this. His stats aren't. I don't care. Stats don't tell the whole story. Watch these. That's when the people talk about Aikman. Oh, he shouldn't be. Please. I just watched 5 or 6 games this week from the 90s. He's 11-4 in the postseason, Aikman. He was probably one of the most. Pat Summerall said he was the most accurate passer he ever saw, and Pat Summerall watched a lot of football. He was on the mud. His passes it was unbelievable. Not so much at the end of his career, but there was a 7 or 8 year period there where the ball was coming out like a rocket, and it was right on, like he said, Michael Irvin. I could have closed my eyes, and he would have hit me in the hands 10 out of 12 times. It was. So when you talk about quarterbacks, there's a lot of leeway for all kinds of different stuff. And I used to say up until about 10 years ago, and if I were to start a team from scratch, I might take John Elway as my starting quarterback. That's how good he was. You go back and watch his games, how he was big, he was strong, he could run, he had an arm that was like a cannon. And he played in those Super Bowls. They were outmanned. And he ended up winning a Super Bowl in his late 30s. Or 2 of them, should I say.
2 Super Bowls.
John Elway was tremendous. He doesn't get enough credit. You know what I mean?
Yep, I agree. You want to go to...
They talk about these guys today. They want to build these guys up today, Mark, like before. They haven't won a thing. They want to talk about the guy from Baltimore over there. What's his name? They want to talk about all these guys. And they haven't really done anything yet. And they make it sound like, look, they were running quarterbacks from Tarkington was the first scrambler, really. But you had guys like Staubach. They were running. They make it sound like this is a new thing. Steve Young was a great runner. I know they weren't maybe as fast as these guys, but they make it sound like it's a whole new thing.
Yeah. Arnie's team had a good running quarterback. Greg Landry, remember him?
That's right.
He was a good running quarterback.
That's right.
You want to move on to Paul Zimmerman's list?
Go ahead, yeah. You have that list in front of you.
Yeah, his list is not as long. because like I was telling you, Sports Illustrated just wanted him to pick 11-man offense, 11-man defense. He said, I can't. That's impossible. But he narrowed it down as much as he could. He picked his top 3 quarterbacks. He said Johnny Unitas was the best under the old rules, and Joe Montana was the best under the new rules. And he also picked Otto Graham. And then
Automatic Auto, yep.
Yep, automatic Auto. Let's see, running back. Okay, here's where I don't know if I think I told Arnie this story, but I don't know if I told you, Dave. I wrote to Paul Zimmerman. I still have, it was in 1999. I wrote to him in care of Sports Illustrated, not realizing that the guy lived about 15 minutes away from me. I wrote to him in care of Sports Illustrated. And he wrote back immediately. He wrote back to me. I sent him my all-time list. He wrote back to me. Typewritten. Yeah, I still have the letter. Typewritten letter. And I sent him my list. And with running backs, he said, you can't. He said, you have a good list of running backs. He said, but you can't. He said, anybody could just make a list of great running backs. He said, but you got to break it down. Like he said, you got to pick who was your best fullback. So he said Marion Motley was the best fullback he ever saw. You were talking about him earlier, Dave. Said he was a punishing runner.
I agree with you, yep.
And not only that, but he was the best fullback at picking up the blitz. He said
Imagine that.
Nobody could get past him on the blitz. Jim Brown, of course. He had Jim Brown. He has Earl Campbell as his best short yardage running back. And he has Hugh McElhenney as his best third down running back. Now,
imagine that.
Yeah. We were talking about Lenny Moore before as being very versatile. Hugh McElhenney was a lot like that too. Very versatile.
That's right.
So those were that's what he didn't go for just picking a list of running backs without breaking it down. And then a wide receiver. He picked 4 receivers, and I think we talked about it in the last podcast. How Don Hudson was the only player on his list that he didn't actually see play. So he flew out to Green Bay to watch game footage of him. And he said he was just astonished. And
imagine that.
Yep. He has Raymond Berry as his best possession receiver. And like you were mentioning earlier, Dave, never dropped a pass. And that's long before receivers were wearing the special gloves. They weren't wearing gloves back then. Never dropped a pass.
No.
He has Lance Allworth as his best deep threat. And he has Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice was kind of an interesting story because he said he interviewed Jerry Rice. And you know how John Madden would always talk about, what did he call that? He would say rack, run after catch, right? He would call it rack,
yes.
RAC. So he asked Jerry Rice, how did you become so proficient at gaining large chunks of yardage after you caught the ball? And Rice, to his credit, gave credit to his quarterback. He said, you have to understand, I never had to reach for a ball. He said, I never had to reach for a ball, especially with Joe Montana. He said, the ball was always right there. I never had to break stride, was his point. He said, as soon as I caught, the ball was right there. So I never even had to stop running. As soon as I caught the ball, I just continued running. And he said, that's how he, gained all that extra yardage running. He said, Rice
that all stems from Bill Walsh.
Right. That's right.
You know that?
Yep.
He designed the plays that way. That was a big thing.
Yep. You're right about that. He said Jerry Rice was the best at running a shallow crossing route. And at tight end, he only picked two tight ends. He picked, he said Dave Casper was the best tight end he ever saw. And then he picked
Really?
John. Yep. He said Dave Casper.
Imagine that.
Yeah. Yeah. He was very high on Dave Casper, and John Mackey picked.
Is Casper in the Hall of Fame? I
Yes.
forgot.
Yeah, he's in the Hall of Fame.
Is he? Yeah, he was great. He came along and like he was a different kind of player. Like he was catching a lot of balls, and the Raiders were very popular. They were like the Cowboys in the AFC. They were in the playoffs every year.
Right. Yeah.
And he was a big target, like of Stabler, and I mean he was good. Casper, people gets overlooked. Casper,
Yes,
I don't know if I'd
he
say he
does.
was the greatest, but I mean he gets overlooked a lot.
Yep.
I actually
Now,
just had to look him up. I had heard of that name before, but I didn't really realize. I didn't even know he was a tight end or what position he played or who he played for.
Yep,
Great.
he was tremendous.
Yes. Now, on the offensive line, he's got two centers. He picked Dwight Stevenson as his best center. And Dermonte Dawson from the Steelers. Those were his two
remember
centers.
him.
Yep. Yeah, he was tremendous.
Really?
Yep.
I
Dwight
could see Stevenson. I don't remember Dawson, although I'd have to look him up and see how many years he played Dermonte Dawson. I think he got cut short by injury. I think.
That's possible. I know Dwight Stevenson got cut short by injury. But I was
Yes,
talking
he
about
did.
I was talking about that when we were talking about the defense. Paul Zimmerman didn't seem to put a lot of stock into how long of a career you had. Like, a lot of people would argue that Dwight Stevens, he had a short career. He said, yeah, but that wasn't his fault. That was actually kind of a controversial play. I think that happened on a Monday night game. I believe it was an interception, and Stevenson was running down the field, and a guy from the Jets, Marty Lyons, nailed him.
I remember him.
Yep, he got him behind, caught him behind the leg, and I'm sure he didn't do it on purpose, but that was it. That was the end of his career. He blew out his knee. Then at offensive tackle,
Dermonte Dawson.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead, Mark. I just looked up Dermonte Dawson, but he did play from 88 to 2000. He's got a pretty good career. And so it wasn't cut short like I had thought. He had 7 Pro Bowls.
Uh-huh.
And that was good because they didn't start voting until about, I think, 2000. They started with the fan vote. So
Right.
most of those were players, and 16 first-team All-Pros. So half his career, he was a first-team All-Pro.
Wow.
I just never thought of him. I don't know why.
Yeah. At tackle, he's got 4 tackles here. He's got Forrest Gregg. He's got Art Shell. He's got Ron Mix. And,
Mix?
yep. He actually thought Anthony Munoz was a bit overrated.
Really?
Yeah. He said he had very good, he actually told me not to tell anyone this. In the letter that he wrote, but this, he told me don't tell anyone.
Right.
He said, don't tell anyone this, but he said he spoke to the offensive line coach. I can't remember what his name was.
Of the Bengals?
I probably shouldn't be telling anyone, but yeah. He said he said he had perfect technique. Munoz had perfect technique, but he didn't really have, you were talking about before, Dave, two really nasty guys, Eric Williams.
Oh, Bob Brown and Eric Williams. Bob Brown, yeah, both of them.
Yeah, they were really nasty. They had that attitude, like you said, he would headbutt people. And he said Anthony Munoz.
He had a couple of different moves.
Right.
So he didn't have a mean streak, Munoz, he's saying.
Right, that's exactly what it was. See, he didn't have that mean streak like Eric Williams or Bob Brown. So, at guard, he has John Hanna as the best running guard, and Jim Parker as the best at pass protection. And you were mentioning
I can see that
too.
easily.
Yeah. And Gene Upshaw, he thought was a bit overrated. He said he was very good at holding. He was a great. He could hold. He mastered the art of holding, where he didn't get caught that much. And the Vikings complained about that.
And he had that cap.
That's right. Yeah, the big. You put those big.
He had the cast on his arm,
that's
like
right.
Madden said.
Yep.
It'd come on every week on Sunday night, and it'd come off on Sunday night.
Yeah. Yep. And I forgot what I was going to say. The Vikings in that Super Bowl. When they played the Vikings in the Super Bowl, the Raiders, the Vikings were complaining about that Upshaw was holding them the whole game.
Super Bowl 11.
Right. Well, we got...
That's a very interesting list.
Yeah. We got the 2010 list here, which we've kind of gone over a little bit. Wide receiver, they got Rice, Don Hudson, Raymond Berry, Lance Allworth. They got Paul Warfield, Elroy Hirsch. They got Michael Irvin and Randy Moss.
They added those two, correct?
Right. I'm not sure if, this is 12 years ago. But I wouldn't have Moss.
I'm looking at...
I wouldn't have Moss in my top 100. I don't think I'd have Irvin in my top 100. But this is 12 years ago. Let's see.
Mark really doesn't like Randy Moss, huh, Dave?
Well, that attitude.
I gather that.
That attitude.
He had less. Moss had less off-field stuff than Michael Irvin. Michael Irvin was getting crazy at that point of his career, like Troy Aikman. I'll never forget it. I have it somewhere in when I used to record a lot of things off the TV set. I have a clip of Aikman getting irate at training camp, saying we need to know if he's coming in here or not. And he said, enough is enough. He said, Aikman had no patience for that stuff. That's why I loved him. The thing about Michael Irvin is when he was going to court for all these problems that he was having with the women there in the hotel room with the drugs and everything, he said only one teammate showed up, and it was Troy Aikman.
Wow.
So here was
that?
the guy who couldn't take it. He couldn't stand it, but yet to his credit, he went and supported him.
Right.
You know what I mean? It says a lot right there.
Yep. Yes.
Some of these receivers, you got to have Lance Allworth, Mark, on that on all the lists.
Absolutely.
I watched a clip on him the other night. He was phenomenal.
Absolutely. Allworth was, I think up until Jerry Rice, he was considered the best ever. And
you're right.
And I don't think you could really compare the two because, the game was so different. The rules that Lance Allworth played under were so very different than what the rules Jerry Rice played under. So
no, you're right.
But I agree with you. Allworth was a dominant receiver. Let's see. Want to go to the offensive line? They got Anthony Munoz, this offensive tackle. Anthony Munoz, Forrest Gregg, Both of those guys seem to make every one of these lists. They got
Yes.
Art Shell, and they got two guys that weren't on the other list. They got Jonathan Ogden. He was with the Ravens, right? And they got Bruce Matthews.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Bruce Matthews played forever, right?
So did his brother, the other Matthews with the Browns, the linebacker?
Clay Matthews. Yep, he was a linebacker.
Yes.
And I think the father played too. I think the father played in the NFL.
Yes.
Yep.
Bruce Matthews. He was. You're right, Mark. He played. I'm looking at his thing here now. He played. He played from '83 to 2001.
Wow.
Okay, 14 Pro Bowls. Tied Merlin Olsen.
Yeah,
Merlin Olsen was 14 Pro Bowls also.
That's saying something.
And 7 first-time All-Pro. 7.
Wow.
Bruce Matthews. He was tremendous.
Yeah. Probably doesn't get the recognition.
He was a 300-pounder, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he was, you know what? Some of these 300-pound guys, when they first came in, are not like the 300-pound guys today. Some of these guys that were, like, Merlin Olsen was up close to 300, but these guys had a waistline. These guys today are brutal, some of them. I hate to say it. There was a game I was watching this past weekend. I forgot what it was. And, like, after 5 yards, 7, 8 yards either way, these guys give up. They stop running. And their stomachs are hanging out. Like, it's like, they got to be good football players to be playing in the NFL at that. But, it's like, they could say the players are bigger today and faster and all this other stuff, but the quality of play in certain aspects is actually going down. You would never see a guy do that years ago.
No.
Like, just stop on a play. Like, just give up.
No. Coaches wouldn't.
I don't get it.
Coaches wouldn't allow it. Now, Arnie, did you see...
there you go.
Arnie, did you see... I don't remember what year he retired. Jonathan Ogden. Did you see him play?
Yeah, it goes back to, like I said, I seen him and I know of him only, and I know how dominant he was in this era, but we didn't really pay much attention to offensive linemen. Just growing up, it was, it was one of those deals where you only noticed him if your quarterback was sitting on the turf, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he came out the same year as Ray Lewis. I want to say for some reason that they drafted Ogden before Ray Lewis, and this was the first 2 players ever drafted for the Baltimore Ravens. So talk about starting your franchise off on the right foot.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm looking at him now. 96 to 2007 with 11 Pro Bowls.
Wow.
Of course, a lot of those were fan voted after 2000, but first team All-Pro 4. He was pretty good. Yes. I'd say that. Yeah. And he was a big guy, let me tell you. Go ahead, Bernie.
No, I was just going to say, like, all those great teams that the Ravens had, like even that season of Jamal Lewis when he had the 2,000 yards, that's who he was running behind. The Ravens they're known more for their defense throughout the years, but Ogden was that dominating force.
Right.
No, you're right about that. 6'9", 345 pounds, Mark.
That's a big boy.
And I think the Ravens were mainly a defensive, or known for the defense, because they never really had like a high tier quarterback. Like they won the Super Bowl with what's his name?
Trent Dilfer.
Exactly. And then after that, they had guys, but it was never like, they never really had a high powered offense. They never had like a wide receiver that you were going to talk about for the next 8-9 years. They just put guys together, and that's a credit. They always have a very competitive team, though, every year. I think Harbaugh is a very good coach.
Yeah, I agree. They always play solid, just team football is what, kind of like how the Titans do. It's amazing how they keep winning every. They haven't had a ton of success in the playoffs, but they really don't have a team like when you look at star athletes other than Derrick Henry there. No,
I love the linebacker there, their coach. I went to Vrabel.
Yep.
I wish the Cowboys had him as a coach. This guy's tremendous. I love him. And you could just tell he's really in tune with a lot of things. And the guys play hard for him. I mean, they got a very average quarterback in Tannehill. But I mean, they come out, they surprise you. Sometimes they win games they're not supposed to we're supposed to win. But I think all around, I mean, they lost their best receiver. What's his name? He went to the Eagles there.
A.J. Brown.
And yeah, look at him. Exactly. So, I mean, I wish the Cowboys had a coach like him.
I'll tell you what, Dave, you're speaking of Cowboy coaches and stuff. I'd be remiss if I didn't let you know the Lions are on a 2-game winning streak. So we have a winning streak for the first time in a very long time. I got to go ahead and say that on air.
I told you the last time I talked to you, I really like Dan Campbell. I really do. I think he's good. And he had a brief stint with the Cowboys. He was down there. He played with them. But he was really with the Giants. Parcells brought him over. Parcells was one of those types of coaches where if he really liked you, he brought guys over. He brought the running back with him back to the Cowboys, Anderson. He was bringing guys in. They weren't great. He brought Vinny. Vinny Testaverde came over. The guy was like 93 years old. He played certain guys that he liked. He would try to get him and come over. He did that with the Patriots, and he did it with the Cowboys. But so that was one of the guys. Was Dan Campbell was one of his guys. He liked them, but so that says a lot. I mean, because I always thought Parcells was a very good judge of hardworking players. He didn't always go for the big name. In fact, I think that's why he left the Cowboys, Mark, because when Jerry went out and got Owens,
right?
I think that really. I mean, I don't think if Romo held on to that snap,
right,
and they ended up beating the Seahawks in that game, and they played another. I think Parcells would have come back even with Owens. I know he wasn't crazy, but I think the crazy way that game ended put the nail in the coffin. But Owens was about 70% there because he just couldn't stand those kind of guys. Couldn't stand them. But we're getting off the list here. But let's get back to that list.
Oh, there you go, football history fan. We will get back on track for the top 100 NFL offensive player list throughout time with your hosts, Mark Morthier, Dave DiPaolo, and yours truly, the football history dude. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Football History Dude. To make sure you're the first to get the next episode, please subscribe on your podcast player of choice and head on over to thefootballhistorydude.com for the show notes and more information on the history of the NFL. And remember, dudes, where we're going, we don't need roads.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.